Senator Bill Hagerty is the first member of Congress to take action against what happened to him and other senators in the Arctic Frost investigation, where they seized the phone records of sitting senators and a member of Congress. Jordan, the senator is going through an FCC route for this, trying to take action against Verizon, who was his telecommunications carrier. He's demanding a written apology and admission that it broke the law by Verizon's CEO and the CLO. Then also, he wants discipline of those responsible, including the CLO and then CEO, now special advisor. He wants documents and information about how Verizon processed this subpoena and its communications with the special counsel, and also wants reform of Verizon's practices to ensure this doesn't happen again. This is at the same time that this morning on Capitol Hill, there are CEOs of these telecommunications companies testifying before a Senate committee, and we'll play some of that sound as well. But Jordan, the ACLJ also is involved in this because we had originally filed FOIAs, which went unresponsive. Now we are taking that step today of suing these agencies to get the documents related to this that the public needs to see.
Yeah, and so this FOIA, initially it was backed by, and it is backed by Senator Cruz, Senator Graham, Senator Tuberville, Senator Blackburn, Senator Hagerty, and Senator Loomis as well. And in this, we requested the records under FOIA. The time started running on their response. And of course, as usual, even with this Department of Justice, they did not meet their deadline. We gave them a little bit of extra time, which you normally would do, and we did that in writing. And so now we are filing in federal court to get this information as quickly as possible. And who we are suing, it's not just the DOJ and FBI, it's specific. It's the DOJ Office of Information Policy, the FBI, the DOJ National Security Division, the DOJ Criminal Division, and the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel. They will all be sued today by the American Center for Law and Justice on behalf of those senators to get these records. And what records are we looking for? The discussions that pertain to putting this information and complying with Jack Smith's order. Any kind of interviews that were conducted about this. Anything that was being discussed by Jack Smith and the investigators about how they wanted to move on this. Because as I remind you from the first segment, when Jack Smith got a pushback from one of these telecom companies for one of these senators, they never responded. So they had to have known they were on very weak legal ground seeking this information under seal by declaring that these senators were somehow a flight risk with no evidence whatsoever that they were a flight risk. I don't think a single one of them had any history or at all. I mean, so it's laughable that they would be a flight risk, but that is how they kept it under seal. So we want the information about that. What the records that authorized the access to this, but yet prohibited access from the members of Congress. Basically, again, then you're looking for all the records tied to this. You want to see what was going on when Jack Smith got that response from AT&T and said, okay, no pushback. There has to be a reason why, right? I mean, whether or not they wrote it down or they had some communications or somebody took it in their notes, he instructed them not to push. And I believe he instructed them not to push because they knew if it somehow got into court or a legal matter, that the telecom companies who did push back were on the right side. But that's all it would have taken if these other telecom companies like Verizon had a backbone and just pushed back and said, this doesn't seem right to us. This doesn't pass the smell test. We need more information about why you're keeping this under seal, why you believe these individuals are flight risk, because we're supposed to inform them within a certain amount of days if you have subpoenaed their records, and this is not allowing us to abide by our normal terms and services and agreement we have with our customers, because that's what those senators are. And I would love to see Jack Smith's response to his team, because you would think his team would say, okay, let's go after him. And he called them off. He called the dogs off. And I only can imagine that's because he knew that if this ended up in a legal proceeding, he had the weaker argument. Such a weak argument that it wasn't even worth trying to push back on AT&T.
That's right, Jordan. And a reminder to everyone watching, the senators, there were 8 of them that were targeted by this. It was right. Senator Graham, Well, actually 9, 8 had their records actually obtained by the special counsel's office. That was Senator Graham, Senator Hagerty, Senator Hawley, Senator Sullivan, Senator Tuberville, Senator Johnson, Senator Loomis, and Senator Blackburn, as well as Representative Mike Kelly. Ted Cruz was also a target of this, but as you mentioned, AT&T did not provide his information, even though some of these others, also AT&T customers, did have their information provided. But why
uniform?
And why I think this is so important for people to remember, because as we talk about, these are senators. It's egregious that they could do this as it is, that he was able to get through these hoops. But remember, Jack Smith testified a few weeks ago on Capitol Hill, and he was telling the members of Congress that day that the reason for using it under seal, the reason for including the language flight risk, etc., are basically just pro forma statements that they file when they want it under seal. That even that is so egregious that the Department of Justice under the Biden administration, their policy was to file statements that were just essentially boilerplate language to get what they wanted. The ends justified the means for the Biden Department of Justice. Things like that have to change, because if they can do that with a boilerplate language saying could be a flight risk, we want you to mask the number, and the courts go along with it. If they're willing to do that for a U.S. senator, not a single person has the right to privacy in their own data anymore under what the Biden administration's DOJ was doing. And I think that's why when we have to continue down this path, we have to see the communication to protect not just the senators and the co-equal branch of government, but for the average ACLJ listener. Because if they feel like they can get away with it, what is the next administration going to do that doesn't have the civil liberties of Americans at mind? That's where we have to continue down this path.
Well, let's go to Robert in Maryland on line 1. Hey, Robert.
Yeah, I wanted to ask 2 questions. The first question was dealing with the issue of Arctic frost, and I wanted to know if there was any involvement by the CIA and the National Security Agency, in addition to the Department of Justice, in obtaining the phone records of those senators and the representative. The second question I had was related to the Benghazi terrorist attack. My understanding is the FBI has captured someone that was involved in the Benghazi terrorist attack on 9/11/2012, and I wanted to know where he was captured.
So
let's answer the second question first.
Yeah, to that, Robert, they have not said specifically, the DOJ, and a lot of that, when they gave the press conference, they said a lot of that was under seal, and that would be to protect sources and methods of how they actually caught this guy, that there had to be someone that gave him up that turned out where, and that could compromise U.S. assets overseas. So a lot of those details are still not known to the public and have not been released. And the last I checked, they hadn't said where he was picked up, but he arrived at Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. I don't think he was, on a beach in Florida and they happened to pick him up. That it was somewhere where there was probably a coordinated effort between the DOJ and other agencies in the U.S. government that would be able to go and take someone into custody like that. So I think there's a reason why they didn't come forward and say he was. It wasn't like the Bin Laden raid where we knew exactly where the compound was and how they got to him. So I would just say that. But Jordan, to the Arctic frost part.
If there's other intelligence agencies, I mean, listen, when you're dealing with the DOJ National Security Division, Criminal Division, you're likely there's crossover there with intelligence community. Whether or not it's the CIA itself or other intelligence branches, there's likely crossover. But it was the DOJ and FBI taking the lead on this with Jack Smith. Remember, he was the special counsel who had this ability to go out and get these subpoenas issued and to these phone providers. But I think as Senator Hagerty says, if this can happen to a sitting U.S. senator, it can happen to any American very easily. And so the way that these telecom companies just kind of bend over backwards for any time the FBI is seeking information, I think should not be the norm. They should ask questions and push back, and they shouldn't just say, well, we got a bunch of random numbers, let's give them everything they want. Why not look into those numbers and see if they're kind of similarly situated? So if they're all U.S. senators or all elected officials, like they were in this case, and they're using terms that wouldn't make sense for current elected officials, like they're a flight risk somehow, even though they have no history of that. I mean, treating them like they are cartel leaders, really. I mean, that's how Jack Smith tried. Now, when there was pushback, he didn't fight back. So we really want to get that information, too, through our FOIA is why didn't Jack Smith fight back on that AT&T time when they would not hand over Ted Cruz's information? We want to know the details. To get that, we now have got to file in federal court against multiple agencies and departments within the DOJ and FBI